let's move on and let's talk about a related type of object, the famous data frames. The official name in R, it's actually data.frame. This is the name, the terminology that R will use to refer to these guys. A couple of things about data frames. A data frame, it's actually a special type of list. So data frames are native objects that R provides to handle tabular data, especially when you have a table in which, when looking at the data, you know you're gonna be combining different data types. One column may be integer, another column may be character, another column may be real or logical values. You know that potentially you could use a matrix to handle tabular data as long as all the values are of the same type. So you're very limited into how much you can do with a matrix. So for generic data tables, the best thing to do is to use data frames. So let's see an example. And say you have a table like this one. Let's say we have 4 columns. The first one, let's call it name. The second one, let's call it height. The third one, it's going to be sex information. And then finally, the fourth column, let me call it force, and you'll see in a minute why I'm calling it like this. And let's consider data about 3 individuals. The first one, it's called Leah. Second individual, Luke, and third individual, Han. And let's give them height values, 1.4. These are going to be in meters, 1.72 and 1.82 or 80. And then finally, the sex is going to be female, male, and male. And then force refers to force sensitive, being force sensitive, and we can use logical values to indicate whether these individuals can feel the force. And I hope that you are familiar with those characters, these individuals from the Star Wars movie. So let me take this as an example. And again, from the conceptual point of view, I think it makes a lot of sense if we could store the information in the name column with character data, the information in height with double data type, the information in sex could also be handled with characters, and finally, the information in the force column, we could use logical values. So how to create this type of table, how to implement this in R? Well, here's where we can use the data.frame function. I'm going to create an object DAT for that, or data, and then invoke the data frame function. And then you can start with the name of the column. The first column, let's call it name, because it has the name of the individual. And then I just simply pass a character vector with the names of our 3 individuals, Leah, Luke, and Han. So that's our first vector for the first column. Then the second column, it's going to be called height, and this will be a vector, double vector, containing the heights of these individuals. Once we finish, we add another comma. Then the next column, the name of the column is going to be sex. This is going to be another vector, and we can use a character vector with 3 values, female, male, and male. That's our third vector. And then finally, the fourth column, let's give it a name, force. And this is going to be a logical vector with 2 true values and 1 false value. So I've provided all of the data for the first, the second, the third, and the fourth column. And then I just close the parentheses of the data frame function. So what's going to happen is that our object that is going to be internally stored as an R list. So that's the way R behind the scenes will handle and arrange the information in our data frame. This is why I told you that data frames in R are special types of lists. So let me give you a picture of what R is doing. Again, conceptually speaking, you're going to have a vector. Let me write it in vertical orientation. So our first guy, it's going to be the name vector. Then you have another vector with the height values. Then we have the information for their sexes. And finally, a fourth vector with the logical values indicating force sensitivity. So what R is doing is, again, handling things internally as a list. So let me draw the blue boxes indicating these are supposed to be the wagons of our hypothetical train. And we just connect them like this. So typically, this is not always the case, but typically what you put inside each element when creating a data frame, it's typically either vectors or their cousins factors, typically of the same length, the same size, so that R can assemble a structure that actually fits a two-dimensional structure. I don't want to call, or I don't want to use the word array just because I prefer to reserve arrays for what it's actually an R array. But R, again, loosely speaking, it's arranging things in a two-dimensional array, two-dimensional rectangular structure. In this sense, data frames, you can also consider them to be two-dimensional objects. So this has important implications in terms of how you're going to handle, how you can manipulate a data frame, because data frames are going to admit two types of manipulations. They can be manipulated as any other list in R, but you could also manipulate them as you would manipulate a matrix in general. So this is very interesting. It's an interesting type of creature in R data frames. And we will learn in a different video how to manipulate this type of objects.